Hello, everyone. This is David Paisley, and I am with Community Marketing Insights. Thank you so much for joining us today for the webinar regarding LGBT diversity training for hotels. We've been doing this training now for a number of years, and it's always, it's always morphing a little bit as we go along. So this is actually some new content and a new format for this particular training. And again, I want to stress that we, and I hope all of you are members of IGLTA. We've actually been members of the organization back in 1993. And if you're not yet a member of IGLTA, we certainly encourage you to be so. All right, so to start off, I'm sure most people here know about TAG Approved and also CMI, but I'll just say we are a San Francisco-based LGBT owned and operated company. We were founded way back in 1992. Although we do serve the hospitality and tourism industry, I'd say about 40% of our clients are within tourism and hospitality. We also serve a pretty wide variety of clients, everything from tourism bureaus. We do the research for about 25 tourism bureaus around the country. We've worked with a lot of the major hotel brands, but we also work with chains like Disney and Wells Fargo and Target and some of the other major brands you see out there outreaching to the LGBT community. Primarily, we are a research company. And that's sort of important to understand is that a lot of the information that I'm going to be talking about today is based on research and the research that we've done within the LGBT community, particularly some of the qualitative or focus group research that we've done. And CMI has a panel of about 70,000 LGBT consumers. A panel is our research group of consumers out there that give us information. It's never used for marketing purposes, just for research purposes. And that can be the basis of a lot of the information I'll be talking about today. I also want to say, as part of the TAG Approved Accommodations program, another thing that we offer at TAG Approved is the Community Watchdog program. And what that means is that if either a guest or even an employee of a TAG Approved hotel has a problem that's LGBT related, they can actually contact us anonymously and we can talk out the problem and make an intervention. And although I can't say that that happens a lot, a couple times a month, it does happen, and it's interesting. A lot of the stuff that I'll be talking about today is based on some of those interventions that we've made, and what we're truly seeing in TAG-approved hotels are how hotels sometimes get themselves in trouble with the LGBT community, usually unintentionally. It's not about policy; it's about employees making bad decisions, and we'll talk that out a little bit through this training. So again, here are some of the different clients that we serve within the tourism industry. Again, we've done a wide variety of research and training for a really wide variety of both accommodations and also tourism bureaus. All right, so let's just start off. First of all, I want to talk about just a quick orientation, even like, what does LGBT mean? And I know that's really basic, but of course, LGBT stands for lesbian, gay men, transgender, and bisexual. The thing that we really want to stress is that just because a person is in the LGBT community does not mean that their other diversity points are not equally, if not more important, right? So I'm a gay man, but I'm also 52. I also live in Palm Springs, California. And I have a background of experiences. And all those demographics equally play into who I am as a person is the fact that I'm a part of the LGBT community. So we always have to look at the big picture, and especially with travel, one thing that we've learned is that men and women travel differently. Older people and young people travel differently, right? And we expect that. So when we think about diversity in the LGBT community, why would we expect a 65-year-old lesbian couple from Sedona, Arizona to travel in the same way as, say, a 22-year-old, queer boy getting his first job in Manhattan? Those are two totally different people as far as they travel and their diversity needs. And we always got to be careful of that within LGBT, not to always look at the community as just sort of like one voice. It's really a combination of different demographic voices that happen to also be LGBT. Also, before I start about some diversity points, I just want to talk a little bit about the LGBT community as it relates to travel, because sometimes when you're doing diversity training, and although this is, basic information, not everyone that will see this particular recording may be aware of this. So first of all, LGBT makes up about 5% of the adult population, so about 1 in 20 people at least living in the United States. So a small group, but a sizable group. Right now hotels are serving LGBT guests regardless if you have an LGBT outreach program or not, and that's really important. So, I think doing an outreach program is a business decision. But even though perhaps outreaching the LGBT community is not the best business decision necessarily for you or as an accommodation, it doesn't mean that you still shouldn't be LGBT friendly and treating all your guests, with dignity and respect. So diversity training like this is important regardless of what your LGBT outreach strategy goals are, because probably about 1 in 20 of your customers are LGBT already, even out without doing anything. One thing that surveys do show is that the LGBT community does have a cultural, it's sort of a cultural desire to travel. And what that means is that when you do research, you'll find that LGBTs, particularly gay men, tend to travel higher than the normal general population adult in the United States. And we index about 1.5% as a whole as a community. So that's about 50% higher. So although we only make up 5% of the market, our impact on the travel industry is actually a little bit higher. Another aspect is that traditionally LGBTs have been considered dual income, no kids. So this is true if you're gay or straight, is if you're a dual income, no kid couple, you have a tendency to have more disposable income. And there's the tendency to spend that on travel. And that's true with gay or straight dinks. Now, of course, that's changing in the LGBT community. Still, most gay male couples are dinks, but it is changing really rapidly, particularly in the women's community. So a lot of lesbian and bisexual women are having children now, and they're not necessarily dinks. They might have children and traveling, more concerned about being a parent and what does it mean to their children traveling with them than the fact that they're a same-sex couple. I think one thing to keep into consideration is that LGBTs have been fighting for equality for decades, and there have been some really recent victories. A lot's been changing. Marriage equality is a really good example. However, do keep in mind that there still are a lot of discrimination issues out there for the LGBT community, particularly for the transgender community. And, they face really significant discrimination. But you got to understand that still in the United States, there are dozens of states that still allow discrimination on LGBT for employment and housing and other issues. And sometimes when you're sitting in a place like, San Francisco or New York City, you sometimes don't realize that in some parts of the United States and other parts of the world, that LGBTs do still face an awful lot of discrimination. And also sometimes when you're sitting here in the United States, you don't have a good understanding that in other parts of the world, that being gay or lesbian is illegal. I mean, it's not even about discrimination; it's illegal. In some places in the world, people face imprisonment or even death for being a gay man or a lesbian. So again, if we look at the world, although again we made great strides here in the U.S. recently, and there's been great strides in Europe and Canada and other places, it's a mixed bag when we look at the whole world. And finally, I want to say, and it's important for the training, is that LGBTs have historically received a higher rates of physical and verbal violence and harassment. So safety becomes a really important issue in the LGBT community, especially when traveling. And the reason I say that, and this is true for the women's community, just the general women's community too, is that when you're in your own hometown, you sort of know what's going on a little bit more. You know where safe places are and unsafe places are. But when you're traveling, you're put into this new environment and you don't always know what's safe and not safe. And that's important within the LGBT community. And safety is always a big issue, and it's in the back of people's minds because we'd like to think that this kind of stuff doesn't happen anymore, but it really does. I'll talk about that a little bit more as we go through the training. All right, so I've broken down the training now into 10 points to consider while serving LGBT guests. And we're going to go over each of the 10, and we can talk a little bit more about each of them. So the very first one, and this is the concept that I like to start every training with, and I'll end with it, is that hospitality is treating every guest and the people that you work with dignity and respect. So this is a truly basic concept, but it needs to be in the back of all employees' minds and their work practices. And what I like to say is that if you can apply this basic concept in your mind and in your work practices within a hotel, you're going to do fine, not just with the LGBT community, but all communities. But I think it needs to be said sometimes to employees that in accommodations, if you cannot treat every guest and your colleagues with dignity and respect, hospitality might not be the best job choice for you, right? It's because if you can't really do that, you really shouldn't be working in a hotel, because that's what hospitality is. And if you can't basically treat everyone with dignity and respect, it might be time to move on to do something else. So I think that's a message sometimes to put out to employees in hotels. The second concept I want to talk about is when you arrive at work, leaving your biases at the door. So this is the thing, is that a training like this, if you play this, say, for staff at a hotel, a training like this over 16 minutes, can't resolve our own personal biases. And it's not intended to. I mean, we all have personal biases and prejudice. I have them, you have them. And that's understandable. It's partly, unfortunately, a little bit of the human condition, right? But although a training like this isn't designed to work through those personal biases, it should be stated that as a worker for this company, for this hotel, if you cannot allow, you can't allow your own personal biases to get in the way of treating every guest with dignity and respect. So again, I think when you're doing diversity training within a hotel, that kind of stuff actually just needs to be said, is that, I'm not here to change your opinion on whatever biases you have. I can't do that, right? That's not what this is about. What I am here to say is that if that interferes with your work here at the hotel, it is grounds for dismissal. And you got to keep it under control here at the hotel. And I think this is especially important for management, is that in doing tag approved and we get complaints, a lot of the complaints are about management. A lot of the complaints are an LGBT employees who are facing discrimination from management. And when I do some of the follow-up interviews around complaints, it's really often, I think, about the personal bias of management. And although we have to all work through our personal biases, I think if you are within a hotel setting, it's especially important for training to managers about what is their personal biases and how you need to check that at the door. Because it can get you in a lot of legal trouble, quite frankly, if managers are using bias around sexual orientation or gender identity or ethnicity issues or age issues or how people look. If they can't work through their personal biases and they're managing employees, that's bad, right? And it's going to lead to trouble. All right. The third thing is the question, does a gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgender traveler have special needs? And what I would say is, for the most part, when it comes to travel, the LGBT community is looking for the same thing that everyone else is. We're looking for relaxation or romance or adventure, to kick back, to learn, to have fun, have new experiences. Those are the basic concepts that everyone travels for. But like all groups of people, there are some special considerations, and we're going to discuss that through the training. But first thing I want to do is focus on how we as LGBT travelers are really just the same as everyone else. And I think this is sort of an interesting little chart. And again, I think sometimes people have some biases, biases about or stereotypes of what a gay man is or a lesbian person or a bisexual person is. But as we do this particular training or in our research, we ask these kind of questions. So one of the questions we ask is, if you had to describe yourself or your personality in 3 words, what words would you use? And within the LGBT community, the words we use to describe ourselves are things like friendly and loyal and fun and caring and funny, right? On the bottom part of the screen, we have the question, please tell us the 3 words that best describe the qualities of your partner and spouse. And here we're seeing words like loving and smart and supportive and intelligence. And when I look at this as a whole, I would say, these are the basic words that we all, as humans, would like to think of ourselves being and our partners being. This is what we want as human beings. And for the LGBT community, it's all exactly the same. Now, notice that on this, when gays and lesbians are asked to describe themselves and their partner, words like fabulous and party and shirtless don't come up, right? Because those are stereotypes, and that's what sometimes the media portrays the LGBT community as, but it's not what LGBTs feel of themselves, and that's really important to understand. And this next question in the research, we ask, when you think of your travel personality, what 3 words most describe your travel motivations and priorities? And here words like relax and fun and comfort and food and exploring are the things that come up to the top. And again, not a surprise. These are the basic words that everyone travels for. So I bring up this little section to just basically say, get through your stereotypes. If there's a gay man or a transgender person checking at your hotel, they are checking into that hotel for the same reason probably your next customer is checking into the hotel. They're checking in to just to get away for a couple days and to break the routine and have new experiences. And that's what they're looking for. What's also interesting, I think, is LGBT parents. One of the questions that we've been asking for a long time is if you had to pick one, and this is, again, just to LGBT parents, if you had to pick one when traveling with your children, what is more important to you and your family? Is it an LGBT-friendly destination or a family-friendly destination? Is it an LGBT-friendly hotel or a family-friendly hotel? And what you find is that when same-sex couples or anyone in the community becomes a parent, their priorities change to being a parent first, right? And that's true of all parents. I mean, once you become a parent, it changes everything. That's true for same-sex couples too. And when a same-sex couple becomes a parent and they travel, it's all about the child to some degree. And that's true for LGBT parents also. The fourth thing I'd like to talk about is this concept of language matters in the LGBT community. And I like to talk a little bit about terminology because it is important. And sometimes you can get yourself in trouble a little bit with terminology. So this particular chart has some green, reds, and yellow cautions. I just want to talk about some of these words a little bit. So first of all, this concept of LGBT. It's interesting. The community has changed what it's called itself through the years. Back in my day, it used to be, at one time it was called the alternative lifestyle community in the travel industry. I mean, like that's what we often called ourselves, is that part of the alternative lifestyles. For a long time, it was just gays and lesbians, but that, of course, excluded the bisexual and transgender community. And then we went to this period of being the GLBT community, and then it was the LGBT community. And I think one of the things that's funny about our community, or my community, is that we do change our name a little bit as time goes on. But today, for the most part, it's called the LGBT community. I would actually call LGBT community before GLBT community. GLBT is something that's still used sometimes, but it's a little bit out of favor right now. Be comfortable with words like partner, because some of us do refer to our partners as partners, while some of us might refer to them as husband or wives. For the most part, we talk in the terms of marriage equality, not gay marriage. Gay marriage is not really a term that really should be used anymore. It's about marriage equality now. This whole concept of sexual orientation is really important. Sexual orientation basically says that, basically I was born this way, and that's how most LGBT people perceive, what's going on inside them. Is that for me, it's not like I was recruited to be gay. I was not, I was not gay because at some point when I was 14, I said, I'm going to be gay now. I've always felt this way. It's how I was born. It's my romantic attraction to men has always been the case. It's never not been the case, and that's the experience of most LGBT people. Same thing with gender identity. It's not that a young person when they're 12 who was maybe born to be a male says, I'm just going to be a female today now. It's been inside them since they were just little kids, right? And it's something that is part of what their identity is, not a choice. So as we get into the red terms, you need to understand that things like, say, sexual preference is really an offensive word. Sexual preference is the word of the religious right that implies that we actually choose our sexual orientation, but that's not the case. You got to be careful about this concept of alternative lifestyle. Even though in the travel industry it used to be called the alternative lifestyle market, if you say that to a gay person today, they're going to be like, why is my lifestyle alternative and not yours, right? You got to be careful of things like your friend, those people. It's weird. It's like I can't tell you how many times. My partner comes from a pretty conservative family in the South, and I can't tell you how many times I've been within their larger family, and they refer to me as your friend. And I'm just like, really? I'm your friend. I've been with this guy 25 years. And although they're not really quite ready to call me a husband, I would appreciate if they could just take it to the next step, at least call me his partner or something like that. but he still refers to us as like your friend there, your little friend there. And that's interesting. Sometimes when we talk about the LGBT market, we hear things like, those people and that market, and that kind of stuff can make you feel really uncomfortable. Right? And I have some yellow caution things. Queer is basically a caution. No, even though some LGBT people use the word queer, it's just not appropriate in most hotel settings. I would avoid that. It's sort of a minority on minority term, and we see that sometimes. Like, I can call my best gay friend queer, and that's fine because I'm a gay person calling another gay person that. But for a straight person or a straight company to call me queer, it has a different context, and it can seem a little offensive. So for the most part, I think as someone who works in a hotel, queer shouldn't be used. Lifestyle is a word you got to be really careful about. It's funny, we talk about like the luxury lifestyle or the outdoor adventure lifestyle, and those are appropriate words and phrasing. But do understand that for a long time, the religious right has been talking about the gay lifestyle, and we don't want to support the gay lifestyle, and the gay lifestyle shouldn't deserve special rights and all that kind of stuff. And a funny thing has happened is that the word lifestyle itself has taken on a negative connotation in the LGBT community. And what we find through the research is that when LGBTs even hear the word lifestyle, there's a negative blip that goes through our mind. So it's a word that sometimes needs to be used with caution. Okay. So the point of all this is that language matters, and be comfortable with the terms of the LGBT community and avoid the terms that sometimes can get you in trouble. I'm going to take a little drink of water here, and we'll talk now about the front desk. So within hotels, there's a lot of talk about the front desk. And the front desk, of course, is a place to make the first impression, so it's important. Now, I find that a lot of the issues that same-sex couples have had at hotels historically over the last 20 years have been at the front desk, but things are so much better today than they used to be. This is the very first ad that was ever put out for the TAG-approved accommodations program. And it's sort of funny. It sort of looks at the problem of the front desk and has a little joke about it. And the concept here is the person behind the front desk is saying, "Oh, sorry, fellas, there must have been a mistake. You were booked in a room with only one bed. Give me a moment, I'll have this straightened out." And the couple behind the desk or in front of the desk is saying, "Damn, I should have used a TAG-approved hotel." This ad is quite old. And it sort of shows some of the issues that same-sex couples can still have today, but it's sort of rare. But I still want to talk about the front desk because it is the place to make the first impression, and some of these issues still play out in the front desk, so it's worth talking about. So the first thing to say is that if you have two guys in front of you or two women in front of you, you can't make assumptions. I mean, these two men in front of you may be straight, right? They may be gay partners. They may be straight coworkers. They could be brothers. They could be two gay friends, but they're certainly not looking to share a bed. So how can you know? The key here is to be able to ask the questions without influence, without weird changes in tone. Now, the nice thing that's happened over the last 10 years is that we've developed reservation systems that allow the guests to request the bed type. And when they come to the front desk, that's all sort of settled right up front. So it's easy. You just need to say, "Hello, Mr. Paisley, Mr. Marshall. I see you have a king bed. We have, it's on the 4th floor. Let's talk about a couple of the hotel amenities." You sort of just tell them what they've booked themselves into, and if there's a problem, the guest will tell you, right? But that's not always the way it happens today. You may get telephone reservations. You may have someone calling because they're looking for a reservation this weekend, and they're just calling. I sometimes use Hotel Tonight. Hotel Tonight will tell you that they don't actually deal with bed requests types. You have to deal with that when you get to the front desk. So there are times when the guest is approaching the front desk and the bed type has not been settled. So I think the key here is to treat everyone the same. Without attitude, assumption, or influence. I think tone is everything. Your front desk staff should just feel absolutely comfortable booking same-sex couples without making changes of tone or awkward expresses of language, or doing the "oh, you're gay" expression before checking somebody in. It's just really simple of saying, asking, "I see you booked with Hotel Tonight. What type of bed would be best for you?" Or maybe you only have twins and you don't have a queen. There's two guys in front of you. And there you just got to be really honest and say, um, hello, thanks for checking in. We only have a couple rooms left, and we just have like two doubles. Will that be okay? Right. So just checking in with the client, just asking without tone of expression. Now this might seem obvious, but almost all LGBTs experience that "oh, you're gay" expression at some point in their lives. And the key here is just to fix misinterpretations with ease and just treat everyone, if they're gay or straight, the same. I'm going to say a couple things about this. I think role playing is sometimes really important because as you're working with new staff, they may or may not have experience with LGBT people, and they actually may be a little awkward the first couple times that they check in a same-sex couple. So I think it's worth actually role playing these kind of things with the front desk staff before they're actually on the floor. So you may ask, does this stuff really happen? And it does. And I'm going to give you an example of my own life, and I'll do this throughout the training. Is that me and my partner checked into a very nice upscale hotel on Maui, and our plane had some mechanical issues coming out of San Francisco, and it was really late. And there was a bit of a drive from the airport. We didn't get to this hotel until like two in the morning. And we walked into this beautiful hotel, and it was like big old lobby, open air, and it was like a ghost town. There was nobody in that lobby but me, my partner, and one person behind this big front desk who was probably a caretaker kind of staff to check in late people, make sure everything's okay at the hotel kind of staff person. So we get to the front desk and we're checking in, and I can tell this particular young man was awkward. He's just awkward about everything. He was awkward about checking us in. He was awkward in using the computer. He didn't seem to quite know what he was doing. And the whole experience with him was awkward. And I remember checking in, him giving us our keys, and we sort of walked away. And I think it was like, and it was one of these hotels you have to walk a while to your hotel room. And I'm like, I don't want to have to come back here. So I just turned to him and said, what kind of bedroom did you check us into? And he said, I checked you into two doubles. And I'm like, oh, okay. I'm glad I asked. We're a couple. We're going to need a king bed. What was interesting about that experience is that his face became relieved at that point. And I really believe it was the kind of situation that he was never really trained, and doesn't probably check in that many people. And as soon as he knew that, he was perfectly cool. He actually upgraded us to a slightly better room, which was really great for us. He apologized. All was good, right? But he didn't have the training to do it. He was just awkward about the situation. And I think what's interesting about that experience is that it was one of these vacations where we spent 2 nights there. Then we went to the other side of the island, did a little eco resort. Then we came back to the same hotel for 2 nights at the end of the trip. And when we came back the second time, we checked in the middle of the afternoon. There was lots of people behind the staff. We went up to this really hip young woman that checked us in absolutely perfectly. And we actually didn't get an upgrade on our room that time. But nonetheless, it wasn't about a training issue. Like, I think the hotel wasn't LGBT unfriendly. It was just they didn't train all their staff. They didn't train that caretaker staff in the middle of the night, but they should. All right, the sixth thing I want to talk about is special considerations at the concierge desk. Now, LGBT-friendly hospitality also means LGBT knowledgeable. So staff should be able to anticipate the follow-up questions from an LGBT guest, such as where is a local gay bar? Are there local cafes? Are there local venues? If applicable, concierge should know about places to avoid. I mean, there are some places, I said before, where LGBT people are just not safe, and it might be worth talking about. Concierge should have LGBT resources, such as LGBT newspapers, maybe a local business chamber directly behind the desk. They should have information about LGBT festivals and events. Like, if say you're there for Pride, you should have information about Pride at the concierge desk. I want to acknowledge, though, that some resorts and rural hotels really, their communities have little or no LGBT infrastructure, and that's okay. I mean, LGBTs travel for a lot of reasons. For the most part, I live in these 2 gay meccas, San Francisco and Palm Springs. When I travel, I, for the most part, travel in a non-gay mecca where there aren't a lot of gay people. It's what interests me because I'm more into outdoor adventure. So I'm not expecting there to be a gay infrastructure there. But there still could be something. So I'm going to give you a couple examples again from my own life. I was in I was in a pretty major city in the United States, and I went to a pretty big hotel which had a pretty big concierge desk with about three people. It was a big convention hotel, and I think it was Chicago. And I actually wanted to know how far away this hotel was from some of the gay bars on Halsted. And also I was wondering, because I hadn't been to Chicago for a while, if one particular bar was still even around. And what was interesting is when I went up, the guy behind the desk was just totally clueless about LGBT, infrastructure within Chicago. Really didn't even know where on Halsted the gay bars were. He asked the other two concierge people who were at this big concierge desk. They had no idea either. I said, well, I'll Google it for you. And he's like, well, what's the name? I'll go gay bar. What do you think I should Google? And he's asking me these questions. He's on the computer. I'm like, you're just useless. Just go away. Stop trying to help me. you know, but it didn't give me a lot of confidence in the concierge desk that they had any knowledge about for LGBT guests. Now I'm going to give you another example. I was in Costa Rica, and this is getting on to be a few years ago, and I was in a really rural part of the coastal Costa Rica, and I was curious. So I went up to the concierge desk of a sort of a resort hotel that was sort of out in the middle of nowhere, and I asked the person behind the desk, because I said, me and my partner are gay, and I'm just wondering if there's any gay nightlife or a place to get a drink tonight, or what's going on in this community. Out skipping a beat, the person said, we do have an LGBT community here in this town, but we don't really have anything like a gay bar or a place to go get drinks. But there is a lesbian couple that owns this cafe in the little town center down the street, and it's sort of the LGBT center. So I would look at their bulletin boards, because sometimes there are like house parties and other kinds of events that are posted on the bulletin boards. But if the LGBT people in this community, they tend to be there, and they go there, and it's probably the best place to find people. Then he continued. Also, you may know that there's a gay beach about 30 minutes down the street. I just want to let you know that's a pretty remote place. And over the last 6 months, we had a couple of gay bashings down there. It's a really beautiful place. I'm not saying not to go there, but if you do go, try to be really safe and be careful out there, because there has been some problems. It was amazing. This person, I don't think was gay, maybe he was, but he knew everything that was going on in this little resort community, and he had so much knowledge, more knowledge than that concierge person in Chicago. So that really made me feel like I was at the right place, right? So knowledge and concierge makes sense. All right, number 7, kind of special consideration, all departments and staff. So being an LGBT-friendly accommodation means that all departments and all staff are on board. They're involved. It's not just about sales and marketing. And that's really typical sometimes, is that LGBT becomes a sales and marketing outreach program, and usually the front desk is on board, but you haven't had diversity training with all the staff. You haven't had, you really haven't talked it out with all departments, and sometimes that can lead to mistakes. So like special communications and welcome letters. I'm going to show you an example of this, but it's really common for people when they're typing out these like little cards and letters, right? Mr. and Mrs. in hotels, which obviously might not be appropriate. Another example of this is like opposite sex couple language versus gender neutral language on sales and marketing materials. Like you have a choice when you're writing marketing materials. You could say, something like, our hotel is a perfect place for a couple to experience romance. Or you could write something like, our hotel is a perfect place for a man and a woman to have romance, right? And that might seem like an extreme difference, but as LGBT people, we see that all the time, is that there's a lot of marketing materials out there that are written not gender neutral, but male-female. And we do see that a lot, and it doesn't need to be. I mean, it could be more gender neutral in a lot of these cases. So another part here is like handling complaints from other guests when a same-sex couple show basic affection. So I'm going to go down a lot of examples. I'm going to spend a lot of time in this particular section. I'm going to show you some examples of all of this and talk about it. Okay, so these are two I'm going to talk about up front. And now this is like a little card. Now Thomas Roth is the president of Community Marketing and Insights, and he travels to Hawaii a lot with his partner Scott. And he traveled to a very large property in Maui, very LGBT friendly brand. And when he got there, they checked him in absolutely perfectly. And him and Scott had got a little nice upgrade on the room because they were part of the loyalty program. And they got to their room, and the loyalty program left a little bottle of wine and some fruit and crackers. And that's all very appreciated. But on the card, it says, Mr. and Mrs. Thomas Roth, welcome. And like, this is so unnecessary. It doesn't ruin Tom's vacation, but it's a sign that the hotel's sloppy, quite frankly. It really should say, welcome Mr. Roth and Mr. Torgan. And as good as the experience and as good as the welcome was at the front desk, somebody types out these cards and are not trained. All right. The second example below that, we got a complaint from a same-sex female couple who was going to have their wedding, and they just wanted to tell us this experience. They didn't want us to do anything about it, but they wanted to tell the experience. And what the experience was is that through sales and marketing, they had a very friendly LGBT person who sold them on having their reception in this hotel ballroom. And a week before the wedding, they went in to talk with the banquet staff about last details. So when they were there, they were given all these forms to fill out, and all over these forms it says bride and groom, bride and groom, bride and groom. And they were like, what is this? Why are you making us fill out these forms that say bride and groom? And the banquets manager is like, oh, don't worry about it. There's been such changes. We just haven't changed it yet. We all know you're a same-sex couple. It's no problem. And this couple was like, we're spending $30,000 with you next weekend. Yes, it's a problem. And they said, like, they cried filling out the forms. They were just about to drop tens of thousands of dollars at this hotel, and the forms keep saying bride and groom over and over and over again. And it's like, it does matter. Get your act together. Why are you so sloppy? How do I know you're going to be actually attending to the details of my event next weekend or my wedding next weekend when you're so sloppy about these forms? So this kind of stuff does matter, and it's about all departments really being involved in thinking this stuff out. I'm going to go back now to this whole thing about complaints. Now, this is interesting because when I look at the kind of complaints we're getting at tag-approved hotels, this is becoming not uncommon. And this is about, again, training of staff. So if you're an LGBT-friendly hotel, it must be okay for a same-sex couple to be able to display the same basic affection within your property as an opposite-sex couple. So, example, holding hands in the lobby, looking at my partner and saying, hon, I'm going to get us 2 more drinks, giving you a little kiss on the cheek at the pool, and going over, getting some drinks and coming back. I mean, this is the kind of basic affection that happens at hotels every day. But what's been interesting as the same-sex couples can get married, they're more quality, and they're less willing to hide their affection with each other. I mean, as a gay couple, I used to hide my affection with my partner all the time, but we're together 25 years. If I want to give him a kiss on the damn lobby, I'm going to give him a kiss. And that's the way it is. And that's how I and many gay couples feel today, especially in hotels that we perceive as LGBT-friendly and safe. We're going to show the basic affection as everyone else does. And usually the hotels are cool with that, but sometimes the other guests aren't, and we have had situations where, and this is probably the best example, is we had a complaint where a couple was holding hands in the lobby during a wine hour, and another guest was offended by that. And he went up to a staff person and basically said to the staff person, look, I have 2 children here. I don't want them to see this kind of stuff in your hotel. I don't want to see them having hold hands. It's not how I'm bringing up my children. You got to do something about this. So what the hotel staff did is they went over to the gay couple and they said, hey guys, we're really gay friendly, but we're having some complaints from other customers. Could you guys just tone it down a little bit? And they're holding hands, right? And obviously the gay guests were extremely offended by that, and the whole thing sort of blew up. Now, the thing is, this was not about hotel policy, because it's not what the manager would have done. But the manager never actually talked out situations like this to the staff. And how do you respond to stuff like this? And it's difficult because, you have different parties involved and you're trying to please all your guests, right? But it comes back to hotel policy a little bit. And the hotel policy here is that the hotel does not have a policy about two guests showing a basic affection. So the staff should have never approached the gay couple. What the staff should have done is they probably should not have looked at the more conservative guest and said, I'm sorry, Mr. Smith, but we're in a gay-friendly hotel here, and we think this is just fine, because that's just going to escalate the situation, right? They should talk in hotel policy, and the response should be something like, I'm sorry, Mr. Smith, but we don't have a policy against two guests showing basic affection. And that's it. Done, right? I'd make it very gender neutral, and that should be the response. And if the hotel staff are not empowered to make those kind of decisions, then they should be empowered to go to a manager who would then say that kind of thing. Another example of all departments. This happened a while ago, but I was in a big urban hotel, and I was like on the 32nd floor walking down the hotel. And it's interesting is that sometimes LGBT guests are somewhat invisible. And what I mean by invisible is that people don't know necessarily that I'm gay, and sometimes that because they don't think I'm gay, that they think it's okay to say and act things that are very hostile to the LGBT community. And a lot of gay and lesbian people experience this, and it's really, really interesting. I was just talking to a good friend just yesterday who went on a pretty major cruise in the Caribbean, and he said one of the more frustrating things that he had, because it happened like 3 times over the course of the week, is he was just sort of doing like random chit chat with random guests who started saying homophobic things to him. They didn't recognize that he was gay, but just started saying these anti-gay jokes. And he's like, this is amazing, right? That this kind of stuff really happens. Well, that gets into point 8, is that LGBTs can really be quite invisible. And we hear slurs and jokes against the LGBT community all the time. Sometimes we bring it up, sometimes we roll our eyes and let it go. Most of the time we roll our eyes and let it go because it's a safer approach to do that. But in day-to-day life, this kind of stuff happens all the time. So we need to talk about this a little bit with our staff, is that staff or guests really do sometimes make LGBT slurs or jokes, hostile or not, in front of a hotel guest. And the reason they do that is that culturally, we still live in a time where things like racial jokes are not acceptable, but gay jokes still are acceptable. And I would say also gender jokes are still acceptable today, which is a whole nother training, right? But it's interesting that we live in a time today that I think most hotel staff would never tell a joke that was against the Latino or African American community in front of a guest. But they actually might say something that's LGBT unfriendly or gay joke, and they actually may say some gender jokes against women that they think are funny or cute, but they're not, and they're especially not in a professional environment. So, and I also want to say this could be true of the LGBT community itself, is that the LGBT community, sometimes as a gay guy, I'll say gay jokes to a gay friend, right? And that might be fine in my house, but it's not fine in a professional environment. Even if I'm gay as a staff person, I'm interacting with a gay guest, it's still not okay, right? So we need to understand that the gay joke or gay slurs is inappropriate, and that the same employee discipline should be expected for inappropriate LGBT jokes or slurs, the same as, let's say, racial slurs. And the same basic policies got to apply to guest behavior. So again, giving you examples here. So I was in a major hotel. This is how this all started. I was in a major hotel, 30-something floor, walking down the hotel, and I ran across a couple housekeeping staff, and they were in the hallway, and they were laughing and joking. Now, the thing is, what happened is they went into a gay guy's room, and I don't know exactly what something sexual something. They saw something. I don't know what it was. But they were basically making fun of the gay guy and making fun of him in the hallway with me walking by. And I don't know why they would do that or how much they talk about guests in the hallway. But nonetheless, I was like, wow, this is really amazing. I'm going to go tell the manager. I'll be curious to see what happens. So I think one thing that needs to be stated, and sometimes this is obvious, but it needs to be stated to hotel staff, is that you don't talk about guests in public areas. You just don't do it ever. I don't care what the deal is. You just never talk about it. And that's like almost grounds for dismissal because it's such not a good idea to do, right? And that really needs to be expressed to all departments. But I think in this case, I went down to the manager and I actually explained to the manager what I heard. And honestly, the manager was totally appalled. He apologized. I thought he was genuine about it. He told me he would have a discussion with not only the housekeeping staff, but all staff over the next 48 hours to make sure he hits all staff. And I was genuinely believe that he did. And I genuinely believe it has nothing to do about the hotel being gay and friendly. It had nothing to do about management being LGBT and friendly. Maybe even these two women were not LGBT and friendly, but something happened there that they were joking about in the hallway, and that's sort of just not appropriate. All right. The other thing I want to say is that LGBTs, like all minorities, are very sensitive to nonverbal communication. So as I said earlier, the kind of like, oh, you're gay expression, that kind of stuff happens to us in the LGBT community really all the time. It's not always necessarily meant to be hostile, but it's just something that we get a lot, right? And here's an example how it can play out in the hotel world. And this happened to me just a while back. I was again at a major hotel. It was chaos. I was checking in about 4 o'clock. There were so many people at that hotel queue trying to check in. The front desk was just filled with people trying to get process as many guests as quickly as possible. It was a little bit chaotic, and I get that. And I was queuing in line, and in front of me checking in was a man who was perhaps a little bit flamboyant, and he had a little dog, and there was something going on at that front desk about the little dog, which I think had to do with an extra security deposit that the guest wasn't so happy about. Again, I wasn't right there, don't totally know, but I could tell there was a little bit of chaos going on at the front desk with this particular guest. My gaydar said the guy was probably gay. And he checked the person in, the guy and his dog walked away, and I was next in queue. So I walked up to the desk, and the guy who was behind the desk sort of looked at me and rolled his eyes and didn't say anything. He just sort of rolled his eyes, said, "Can I help you?" And I was like, what did that mean? All right. Meant nothing. It was nonverbal communication. But I'm like, what did that mean? Did that mean, I'm so sorry? Rolling his eyes. I'm so sorry. How can I help you? Or was it, did you see that fag and his dog? Can I help you? Well, as a gay man, I actually thought it meant that, did you see that big fag? That's really what I think he meant. That's what I picked up. I don't know that, but I was like, whoa, I can't believe you just did that. And this is the kind of stuff that you actually need to talk to hotel staff about, is that these nonverbal cues that you make can be interpreted very poorly. And what I'm going to say is that minority groups, be it gay people or ethnic minorities, we are very sensitive to this nonverbal communication because we get it all the time. And it's something that you need to actually talk about and train your staff about. All right, number 9, and this is a focus on transgender concerns. So transgender refers to a broad range of people who experience or express their gender differently than what most people expect. And ultimately, transgender itself is an umbrella term that includes people who are gender nonconforming. So this is the thing, is that although I think as a society, we've gotten a lot better with gay and lesbian issues, we have a lot more way to go with bisexual issues and a way more ways to go with transgender concerns. I think it's really unfortunate as we make strides that include sexual orientation, that the whole gender identity issue is still woefully behind on. And it concerns me. I mean, even in the political process, I'm seeing that, like what happened in Houston recently, that the transgender community, there's just a lot of concerns there, a lot of discrimination. And I want to throw this out here is that although, again, we're getting better with gay and lesbian issues, transgender people today experience such higher level of discrimination. And I think largely hotels don't really understand the concerns of transgender people. And the third thing that I can't stress enough is that although safety is a big issue for all gay men and lesbians, safety is especially an issue for the transgender community. It's interesting that the city of Fort Lauderdale recently did a big study on the transgender traveler and what they will need to do to make their city more safe for the transgender community. And one of the biggest concerns that came out was safety. And one thing that I really learned from being the project head on that particular research is that the transgender community often said that they don't like to travel sometimes because of that safety issue, that in their own hometown, they've learned what's safe and not safe. But when they go to a new city, it's harder to know what's safe and not safe. And as much as things like gay bashing and harassment happen for gay men and lesbians, it happens so much more for the transgender community. And we really need to be addressing the issue and thinking this out a little bit more within the hospitality industry. So a couple things I want to say about this. The first thing is I think is curious is that we got to get beyond this whole myth of what I'm going to call the myth of two genders. So sometimes that shocks people. Like, what do you mean there's not just men and women? That's how I was brought up, and that's the way I've always been brought up. And what's curious about that for me is that that's not the way historically all societies are brought up. I mean, when you look at the history of transgender people, you'll find that there's many cultures from the past who recognized transgender people a very long time ago, and there weren't these big discrimination issues around it. It's also just interesting from a genetic standpoint. Now, if you look at the basic chromosome sets of XX, XY that traditionally we think of what makes ourselves as men and women, depending on your worldview, be it is your worldview in nature or is it God or whatever your worldview is, clearly it's more complicated than that. Is that when we look at chromosome sets, that yes, most people are XX, XY, but people are XXY, XYY, XXYY. There are all sorts of chromosome sets that aren't so gender specific or by gender conforming, right? So, it's not how nature made us as a species. It's not culturally what a lot of cultures have recognized that they're transgender people for centuries. It's a myth that there's two genders. And it just seems to me so obvious that that's true, but it's not so obvious to a lot of people. But it's the basis of discrimination. So do understand that travel may not feel safe sometimes for the transgender individuals. And there are some big issues. And one of the least safe place for transgender people is public restrooms. So you got to be careful about that specifically, and that's something hotel policy can really deal with. Is that first of all, as a person, I get to choose my gender identity, and I get to choose the bathroom which is best for me. But at the same time, that can cause problems sometimes with other guests who sometimes may view the worldview a little bit differently, and it has led to some unsafe situations for transgender people, and sometimes complaints to hotel staff, where hotel staff respond very inappropriately. Maybe very similar to what I was talking about earlier about the two holding hands in the lobby. We have a lot of similar complaints where maybe a transgender person is in a restroom or they're in a public area, a guest is complaining, and then the staff go to the transgender guest and do some very inappropriate things. So what I'm going to say about this for hotels is that you need to get your policies in place for the transgender community. You have to train the staff about your policies about the transgender community. It is good to have gender neutral bathrooms, particularly in public areas. And you need to think out what's going on with discrimination in the transgender community and transgender guests. Because if you don't, you're going to get yourself in trouble a little bit, and not only in trouble potentially legally, but even from a PR perspective. And the last two times that I've had an issue with tag-approved hotels doing something inappropriate to a transgender guest, it blew up in their local gay press, and it really made the community question if these hotels were LGBT friendly. So there's implications, both legal implications and also PR implications for you not really thinking out and having transgender specific policies and training. All right. So in some ways, a diversity training like this, as I'm touching on a lot of different points, but this is just something I really want you to focus concerns out, because I would say a good third of the complaints I've had this year around transgender concerns. And it's a place where hotels are getting themselves sort of in trouble with because they've thought out the gay male and lesbian issue, but they haven't thought out the transgender concerns. All right, the 10th and last point I want to say is just be genuine and have fun. You know, a training like this is not meant to be scary or stifling. And I think ultimately, particularly the LGBT community, appreciates people who are genuine and who are fun. So, always just go back to point one. Just always remember that if you're treating all your guests with dignity and respect, you're most likely meeting the diversity needs of your guests. You're meeting the LGBT diversity needs, the ethnicity diversity needs, the gender diversity needs, and all the diversity needs. If you could just step back from your own personal biases and just treat someone with dignity and respect, things just tend to work themselves out. So that's the main point about diversity training like this, and I think it's good. I mean, there are some specific needs of gay men, lesbians, bisexuals, and transgender, and we've talked about this a little bit through the training. But when it comes down to it, it's just about treating people with dignity and respect, and you'll be fine. So thank you so much for listening. Again, I'm going to stop this recording right now, but thank you so much. My name is David Paisley. I'm with Community Marketing Insights. Always feel free to give me a call. And if you have any additional questions, feel free to send an email. It's on the screen right now at david@communitymarketinginc.com. Happy to get your questions over time. Thank you so much.